Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. We
Yeah.
love to go deep around here.
Absolutely. And today we're really getting into it, going deep into the world of psychology research.
Yeah, we're cracking open a whole stack of research papers. Really just fascinating stuff that makes you kind of look at yourself and think, why? Why do I do that?
It's like holding up a mirror to your own mind, right? All those quirks and patterns.
Exactly. And we're going to pull out those little nuggets, those aha moments.
The stuff that makes you go, I never thought about it like that before.
Yeah, so to kick things off, we're diving into something called unrealistic optimism. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, yeah, it's a classic, and we all do it to some degree.
It's like that feeling that, good things are more likely to happen to you than to other people.
Exactly. You overestimate those positive outcomes and kind of downplay the negative ones. It's like rose-colored glasses for life.
Right. And we've got some research from Weinstein back in the 80s that found people consistently believe they're less prone to health problems, more likely to achieve their goals compared to the average person.
It's almost like we all have a little bit of main character syndrome going on.
Totally. But there's a flip side to this, too. Research from Wood and his team in the late 90s found that folks with high self-esteem are also better at bouncing back from bad moods.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe a little bit of that unrealistic optimism isn't a bad thing after all.
Right. It might actually be fueling our motivation to overcome challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, but get this. Have you ever heard of blind sight?
Blind sight.
Yeah,
This one's pretty wild.
this is like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Weisskranz was doing some mind-blowing research on this around 2009.
So basically, blind sight is this phenomenon where people with damage to their visual cortex, the part of the brain that processes sight, they can still react to visual stimuli even though they report not being able to see them.
It's like their brains are still processing the information, but they're not consciously aware of it.
Right. It's happening below the level of conscious awareness.
It makes you wonder what else our brains are doing behind the scenes, right?
It really does. And that leads to some pretty deep questions about consciousness and free will. If our brains can do all this without us knowing, how much control do we really have?
Right, those are the big questions. Now, for our next big theme, we're tackling that age-old debate, nature versus nurture. Do our genes or our environments have a bigger impact on who we are?
The classic nature versus nurture debate, it never gets old.
Wow.
And it gets especially interesting when we talk about intelligence.
Yeah, so let's start with something called the Flynn effect.
The Flynn effect, right? This refers to the steady rise in average IQ scores over the 20th century.
So basically, people are getting smarter over time.
On average, yeah. And Flynn in 1987, he proposed that this trend is largely due to environmental factors like better education, better access to information technology, all of that.
So it's not just about what we're born with, but about the opportunities and resources we have access to.
Exactly. Our environment plays a huge role. But then on the flip side, we have twin studies. Bouchard and Maged, their research in 1981 looked at twins raised apart and found a strong genetic component to intelligence.
So it's like genes provide the blueprint, but the environment can significantly influence how that blueprint is expressed.
It's a real tug of war. And to add another layer of complexity, we have the research of Walton and Spencer from 2009. They found that negative stereotypes can actually lead people to underestimate their own intellectual abilities.
So it's not just our genes or our access to resources. It's also about how we perceive ourselves and our potential, which is shaped by social factors.
It's all interconnected, right? This fascinating interplay between nature, nurture, and even our own self-perception.
It really highlights the complexity of human development. Okay, ready for a shift?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about something that impacts us all, mental health, specifically depression and anxiety.
Yeah, these are topics that are so important to understand. We'll start with something very basic, your internal clock.
Our internal clock.
Right, the circadian rhythm. It regulates our sleep-wake cycles and a whole host of other bodily functions. Turns out it's also closely tied to our mood.
We all know how messed up we feel when our sleep schedule is thrown off.
Absolutely. But Terman's research in the late 90s actually showed that light therapy can be really effective for seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. It highlights just how important light exposure is for regulating our moods.
That's right. Getting enough sunlight, it does more than just give us vitamin D. It has a direct impact on our mental state. But there's also a psychological side to these conditions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So what about those times when we're feeling down or anxious, even when we're getting enough sleep and sunshine? What's going on there?
Well, Taylor and his team in 2011, they looked into the role of defeat and entrapment in depression and anxiety. Their research suggests that feeling helpless or trapped in a negative situation can really contribute to those mental health struggles.
It's like that feeling of being stuck in a maze with no way out.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly overwhelming. But luckily, there's research pointing us towards ways to combat those feelings.
Absolutely. Roche and his team in 2014, they found that believing in the possibility of change has a positive effect on stress levels, overall health, and even achievement. It seems that cultivating a growth mindset, even in the face of adversity, can be a powerful tool for well-being.
So even if we feel stuck, remembering that things can change and that we have the power to make changes can make a big difference.
Right. Focusing on what we can control instead of dwelling on what we can't can shift our perspective and help us move forward.
This has been a whirlwind of information. We've covered so much ground already, from the quirks of perception to the nature of intelligence and the complexities of mental health. And we're not done yet.
There's a lot more to unpack, and I think you'll find these next few points particularly thought-provoking. Let's dive back in, shall we?
It's kind of crazy to think about, right? If our surroundings have such a big impact on our intelligence, shouldn't we be like putting more effort into creating environments where everyone can, really thrive?
That's a great point. It takes us back to the Flynn effect. If things like education and access to technology have been driving those IQ scores up over time, it makes sense that we could boost those scores even further if we made those resources available to everyone.
Right. It's like if we know these environmental factors have such a huge impact, we have this responsibility to make sure everyone has the chance to benefit from them. It's not just about like individual potential. It's about creating a society that really helps everyone grow intellectually.
Absolutely. Think about it, a world where everyone has access to quality education, stimulating experiences, supportive communities. It's amazing to think about the potential we could unlock.
That is a powerful thought.
Mm.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, let's go back to that idea of blind sight for a minute. Remember how we were talking about those people who can react to things they can't consciously see? It's like some part of their brain is still working even though they don't realize it.
It really is a fascinating glimpse into those unconscious workings of the mind, and it does make you wonder if we could somehow tap into that unconscious processing power, for things like learning or therapy.
So that is a really interesting idea. It's like instead of always trying to consciously reason through problems, maybe we could find ways to work with our unconscious minds to help us reach our goals.
Exactly. Imagine developing techniques that could harness those unconscious processes to help people learn new skills more effectively or overcome those deep-seated fears. It could revolutionize how we think about education and therapy.
It's like we're just scratching the surface of what our brains are capable of. There's still so much we don't know about how the mind works, and the possibilities for future discoveries, they feel endless.
Psychology is so captivating because it's this constant journey of exploration. We're always uncovering new layers of human thought, behavior, and potential.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of psychology today. We've covered so much ground, from those quirks of perception to that whole nature and nurture debate, and even touched on the idea of harnessing the power of our unconscious minds.
We hope you've enjoyed this little journey into the inner workings of the human mind, and that maybe you've even come away with some new insights and a new sense of wonder about what it means to be human.
Thank you so much for joining us on this adventure. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. It's wild how much we've talked about, right? From unrealistic optimism to blind sight and that whole nature versus nurture thing. It really shows how connected all of these psychology concepts are.
It really is. And what's so interesting is how each of these topics makes us question what we thought we knew about, how we think, how we learn, how we see the world.
Totally. Like we think we're in control, but then something like blind sight comes along and shows us there's all this stuff going on in our brains that we have no idea about.
Yeah. And even with intelligence, which you might think is pretty fixed, the Flynn effect shows how important our environment and our opportunities really are. It makes you rethink what human potential really is.
And speaking of potential, that idea of using our unconscious minds for learning and therapy, that's mind-blowing.
Isn't it? Imagine what we could do if we figured out how to work with those unconscious processes directly. It could completely change the way we approach personal growth and well-being.
It feels like we're just starting to understand what our brains can really do.
Yeah,
Like we're on the edge of a whole new era of understanding the human mind.
it's true. And who knows what other discoveries are out there waiting for us.
Exactly. That's what makes this deep dive so exciting. We've gone through decades of research, uncovered some pretty crazy concepts, and hopefully given you some new things to think about.
We hope you'll keep thinking about these ideas, do your own exploring, question your assumptions, and never lose that curiosity.
Because the more we understand about the human mind, the more we understand about ourselves and our place in the world.
Thanks for coming along with us on this deep dive into the world of psychology. We hope you've enjoyed it.
And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.